Hey everyone, Reid Henrichs with Valor Ridge, and today is April 19th. And if you know about this country's history, you'll know April 19th, 1775 is a very memorable day in our nation's past. Because on April 19th, 1775, this is when the colonists opened fire on the British Redcoats, who were after their guns, ammunition, cannons, and food supply. And you know what? Lexington and Concord, the famous shot heard around the world, this is when that happened, okay? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory about what was the deal, what was going on, and why it went down. So let's get to it. So after the Boston Tea Party, and even before, but especially after the Boston Tea Party in 1773, the British really started cracking down on people in Boston, the colonists in Boston, and the town did not like their presence there at all. Most of the people living in Boston, and Boston was a hotbed of gossip, news, political dissension. That's where the Sons of Liberty, the guys like Sam Adams, John Hancock, those guys were very active in the Sons of Liberty who were protesting the British treatment of the colonists. Now in Boston you had a lot of people who were very resistant to the British force and the Redcoat army that was stationed there. So what happened was that these people in Massachusetts, the colonists there, especially in the countryside, especially 10, 15, 20 miles outside of the city of Boston, started forming militias. And in those times, the militias were for their community protection. Okay, a man was expected to be in the militia, and it's pretty crazy. Nowadays you hear people talking about gun control. Well, back then, if a man did not have a private gun or a personal gun, they were actually given a gun to defend their community. So instead of gun control, you had gun welfare, so subsidized guns. So they were trying to give guns away back then as opposed to take them away. It kind of shows you a departure from things. But to get back to the story, communities outside of Boston, outside of the city, in these farm communities started training, organizing militias in order to protect themselves. They didn't want the same thing to happen to them as what was going on with the Bostonians. So what you had is a lot of people started forming militias and training in the Massachusetts countryside. Well, we had a big incident in 1774 in September. What happened was that the British military had heard of the colonists storing gunpowder, and back then gunpowder was stored in things called magazines because black powder is very, very explosive. No pun intended, it's literally explosive. So gunpowder, large quantities of gunpowder were kept in places called magazines. And these magazines were often held outside of the city because if they exploded, of course, you'd have a major incident with people. So these magazines were just big old silos that were designed to hold black powder. Well, the British went there in September of 1774 to seize gunpowder from the colonists. This is what is commonly referred to as the powder alarm. So the British were sent there to confiscate and or destroy this powder supply. Well, when all these colonists heard about it, they rallied and said, no, this isn't going to happen to us. So there was rumors that there were 15,000 or more colonists that went to stop the British. Now, there was rumors that there was a big gunfight and there was a big fight with it. It never took place and the British left peacefully. But after September of 1774, what you had is a huge increase in colonial militias organizing, training, and getting their stuff together for an imminent British violation of their rights. Fast forward to April of 1775. So when these colonial militias started training in earnest, what happened is that the British, who were commanded by General Thomas Gage, received orders to go destroy a large quantity of powder, cannon, food supplies, and guns at Concord. But they had to go through Lexington. If you look at a map of Massachusetts countryside, Lexington and Concord were to the west of Boston. They're approximately 18 to 20 miles west. We've all heard the poem, one if by land, two if by sea. If you look at a map of Boston, it's a peninsula, okay, so it's surrounded on three sides by water. Well, how would the British get to the countryside? Would they row across with boats, or would they take the southern peninsula out? So one if by land, two if by sea. Obviously it was by sea, so the British rowed across. You had three riders that were dispatched. They're all Sons of Liberty. You had Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Samuel Prescott. Two of the three were captured. Revere was captured. William Dawes did not complete the ride either, but Samuel Prescott did. He made it to Concord and was able to warn the colonists there. So when the British got to Lexington, we don't know exactly how many colonial militia stood there in their way, but it was approximately 1 to 200. Small skirmish ensues. a dozen plus colonists were either killed or injured. One British redcoat was injured. But what is known is that the colonists did fire a volley, but they did disperse. They did disperse and let the British continue on to Concord. Once the British got to Concord, they organized their forces. They divided them in half. This was a big mistake, because what was waiting them at Concord was a force much greater than the 1 to 200 at Lexington. There were a lot more, 2 to 3 times more of a force that were waiting for them at Northbridge at Concord. This is where the colonists stood their ground and not only fought the British, but broke them and caused them to retreat. They had to retreat all the way back to Boston. Imagine retreating 15 to 20 miles back to Boston. They were under fire the entire way, and the British sustained anywhere between 200 and 300 casualties. And by the time the British got back to Boston, by the time they got back there, you literally had anywhere between 12 and 16,000 colonial militia surrounding that city. Talk about kicking a hornet's nest, and that's exactly what happened. And that is the start of the American Revolution. April 19th, Patriots' Day, when a nation born of armed rebellion came into existence. Be proud of your heritage and know that the American Rifleman is the one that set this country free, and it's going to be American Riflemen that keep it free. If you like the video today, subscribe to the channel, like us on Facebook. Those links are below. And if you want to learn how to preserve your heritage of the American Rifleman and even beyond, if you want to get good training, go ahead and go to valorridge.com. Check out our website. Check out our message. We'd love to meet you. This is Reid Henrichs with Valor Ridge. See you on the ridge.